Janine had an unexpected death in the congregation last week, and so we're also holding that. We had Shiva tonight at the house, and so I apologize. I would have been here a little bit earlier, but was doing the other side of another side of leading, and that was leading leading Shiva services. Switching gears tonight to commemorate what we know as Yom Hashoah, this day of honoring the memory of the Shoah, of the Holocaust. And I feel very fortunate that Guy agreed to speak, because it's not easy to do. He's already gifted us once before, but I was not yet the rabbi at that time, and so for me, thank you.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. And I know that David is going to be leading in the interview, and I'm so thankful to you as well. Thank you for your time. And although I heard that you decided you would be willing to do this over dinner in New York City, of which I was not invited. So it doesn't sound too difficult of a process.
Yeah, we have to warm up.
Rabbis eat as well and would like to go places too. So just putting that out there. But truly, thank you for taking this as well. And as many of you may know, my family I was raised by survivors. My father was born in a displaced persons camp in Germany. And they lived there for a few years, and then they went to Israel, and then they came to America. And so Yom Hashoah for me is every day. And I think for a lot of people who grew up in survivor families or who are survivors, this is a day for everybody else to remember. But for so many of us, it's every day. I just wanted to share this one poem from Yehuda Amichai, because when I first read it, it knocked me over. And I thought, I can't believe how beautifully so Yehuda Amichai was an incredible poet. He was, if Israel had had a poet laureate, or a national poet, he was it. And he was he was born in I believe it was Germany, and he immigrated. He made Aliyah to Israel before the Holocaust occurred, but he lost many people who he left behind, and there's survivors guilt in his work as well. So this is the poem. It's called All the Generations Before Me. Can you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. All the generations before me donated me bit by bit, so that I'd be erected all at once, here in Jerusalem, like a house of prayer or charitable institution. It binds my names, my donors' names, it binds. I am approaching the age of my father's death. My last will's patched with many patches. I have to change my life and death daily to fulfill all the prophecies prophesized for me, so they're not lies. It binds. I've passed 40. There are jobs I cannot get because of this. Were I in Auschwitz, they would not have sent me out to work, but gassed me straight away. It binds. And the word that he used for binds is chayev, which is a religious word. It's about binding is mechaye is like what you are obligated to. And so his conversation here about obligation to memory, obligation to how you live your life, is something I think all of us really are grappling with as we are learning what it is to be Jewish post World War II. So thank you for being here. Thank you both so much. I'm glad that I didn't get the notice either about the stripes, but at least. Very good. And I will.
We are French brothers in solidarity. And actually, by way of coincidence, and maybe not, Guy and Ronnie have become very close to my cousins in France, and I'm gonna talk about them at the end because my cousin Corinne and I share the same great-grandfather and grandmother who were arrested on this day in 1944 and murdered in Birkenau 5 days later. And so he and Ronnie have become like family to my French cousins, which is a beautiful thing. And Guy got me this shirt. So I said, I'm wearing it tonight. You wear yours. So let's begin. Guy's had an amazing journey from childhood in France to here in America. And we'll try to take it with some chronology, also thematically. But why don't we begin, Guy, by telling us a little bit about your childhood, preoccupation, the home you grew up in, your parents, was it a religious home? What was your childhood like?
Well, I was born in France in 1936 in a small town called Marly-le-Roi, with 18 kilometers of Paris, 10 kilometers from Versailles. The town was very similar, like New York. It was a town of artistic people and a lot of farm, not big farm, like in New York or in Park County. I was born in the house of my grandparents on my father's side. My grandmother, my whole family, I will say, came from Alsace. So my grandmother came to the town at the age of 14. And then my parents live in the same house with my grandparents because both of them, they were students. But my mother was born in Germany. So I grew up with a German mother and a French father, very French, very, very devoted to the country. I grew up very pre the war, everything was fine. They had a big house with a big piece of land. Everything was fine until the war started in 1940. In 1940, I was barely 4 years old, so I don't remember. But by 1942, where the French government collaborated with the German, with the Maréchal Pétain, it was a nightmare for every Jewish family all over the country. In the town where I was, I don't know how many Jews, I don't think, not too many. Our neighbor knew we were Jews, but everything was fine. But in 1942, it was, like I said before, a nightmare. So I was going to school, elementary school. The school was in town, about a mile from our house. And I had to wear that Jewish star. Every Jew had to wear that Jewish star. So after, I don't remember the day or the month, but my parents decided not to go to school. I should be staying home and not to go out until the war is over. But it took 2.5 years.
So you never went out wearing that star, that was it?
After that, no. I did wear it for few months, but I cannot tell you if it was 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. But when they took me out of school, I had to stay home, not like Anne Frank, but in the same,
So you were staying in your grandmother's house
yes, I
The whole-
never went
the whole
out
time?
until the end of the war. And I do remember very clearly, by that time I was almost 6 years old, so it was different. So my mother, my grandmother took me outside of the house in the garden. We couldn't talk because in town, the Wehrmacht was there. There was not a big headquarters, but it was an headquarters with truck and motorcycle with a car on the side. And not every day, but very often, they were going from one house to the other house to search not only Jewish people, but people who were maybe communists, the resistance, and the town was a wonderful town. A lot of gays were living there, and that was for them was not. So they were time to time, but then they never came for 2 years until 1944.
Which is towards the end of the war.
It was almost at the end of the war.
So
Yeah,
we-
a few months before, I don't remember if it was 4 months or 5, I don't remember the date of the month,
So,
but they came to arrest us.
so were you always dreading that there was gonna be a knock on the door or the police were?
Well,
gonna
that's,
come?
yeah, I mean, my mother was always very anxious. My grandmother also. I was scared also because I saw my mother and my grandmother to be scared. So we did a lot of things to protect us. We had curtains, they were closed. We barely look on the outside when the Germans were parading, in town or they were passing by. If we were in the garden, we couldn't talk.
So what happened when you finally got the knock on the door in 1944?
In 1944, so I told you before, my mother was born in Germany. She was a student. So they came. So my mother and my grandmother said, you should hide, go right away in the basement. We had a place for me. I have a brother, but he was a baby. He was born in November 23rd, 1939. So when the war started, my mother she had the baby. So when the German knocked at the door, so we went with my grandmother, my brother and I, hiding in the basement, and my mother opened up the door, was a young officer with couple of soldier with gun. She told me that after. I didn't see it, but she told me. And she opened up the door and the officer looked at her, he said, Margot. And she said, Hans, how is everything? I don't know if they spoke French or if they spoke German. I don't know. She said, everything is fine. What about you? Oh, everything is great. And he closed the door. So we were safe. And the rest of her life and my mother's life, my mother was very religious. Not me, but she was. So she said, it's a miracle of a shame, what happened. How an officer who were in the same, from the same town, from the same university, who came to arrest us, so we were safe.
And of course, he knew that you were Jews.
But of course, my mother was very, he knew my mother very well. They were not close friends, but they were good friends.
Amazing.
They were in the same promotion, so everything, anyway, we were safe.
So where was your father at this time?
At that time, my father was arrested in 1942.
Which was the time of roundups, pretty much all
Over France. So he went out in town, was not a big town, or maybe, but it was a main street like in Europe, and he went to a bakery to get a loaf of bread. And he passed by the the headquarters of the police, who was awful. And they called him up, and that was it. He was right away. They took him to a camp not far from Paris called Drancy. And in Drancy, he was there for 3 months, and he was sent to a labor camp. And from 1942 to 1945, one day he came back. He survived. How he survived, I have no idea. He has no idea. But after the war, until he passed away, my father never wanted to talk about anything. When I asked him questions, he was very strict, So I know very little about my father, really.
So when and Drancy was the main transfer camp for most of the Jews that were getting sent to the camps, and they could be there for a week or even a year. So did you know that your father was arrested? Did he come home to
No.
get any of his things?
But my mother knew. We had very good neighbor, gentle neighbor, but a very good. And they came to my mother and they said, your husband was arrested. And, that was it. And she never heard anything. We wrote letters. And it's funny, last week I found a card I wrote to my father telling him, I hope everything is well. I still have the card. I cannot believe it. I had that. I show it to you one day.
Yeah, and you were probably
I
You were
was
seven?
probably
7 or 8.
no, in 42.
42.
I was 6
Six.
something.
Yeah. So
You know.
So when you found out he was arrested, and your mother was everybody in a panic?
Of course, she was crying and so on, but we didn't know what to do, and she didn't know what to do, and it was very difficult for my mother and my grandmother, and because in 1942, I don't know if you know a little bit about France, what happened, but they closed for the Jew everything. If you had a job, you were out. If you had a store, my grandparents had a store, they were jeweler and watchmaker, it was taken from them. Every bank account was closed. And my grandparents, maybe they didn't have the foresight to get money in advance. So after that, my grandmother, we had nothing, but nothing. So living was absolutely a nightmare because we had no food. Okay, so my mother risking her life once a week, she went to a farmer, but she didn't have any money to buy the food, so she took a piece of jewelry she had, gave him the jewelry for some vegetable. Meat, forget about it. Because first of all, it was not kosher, since my mother was quite religious, so she didn't want that. And the rest, was nothing, no eggs, no. So I grew up in very difficult time I was starving. So what we went out in the garden, and today is a luxury and everybody likes it except me. We dig dandelion, in the summer. And everything was a problem, everything. It was not easy.
So what about your neighbors? Were there any neighbors that were you?
Well, first of all,
touch with?
that at that time, the house were not close like in Europe, was one house here, one house, a few, few yards over. We had two neighbors, they were very nice, but they could not bring food because in France, when the German came, they took the food from the people, so everything was in ration, So we saw it was nothing. It was more than what I had, but it was not in surplus, and they had children also. So,
Right.
That was it.
There was somebody, I think you said, offered to take you and.
Well, that's something else. In town, he was a doctor and he was a member of the resistance. I know that, we knew that after. But he was a member of the resistance and he came to my parents in 1942. I don't know the month. And he said, look, he told them, I am a resistant and I have few kids in my house. They are completely safe. What, you don't give me your two kids? And my parents, for some reason, they said, no, we are going to keep the kids. And in 43, I believe, my mother told me after, he was a neighbor, told the police. He was saving Jewish children. They came, he was shot right on the spot. And the kids who were there were taken, and my mother knew what happened to them. They didn't go to concentration camp. The next town, was a very close with the Seine River passed by, and those kids, they drowned them. So I was very, very fortunate of my parents to say no.
Another very amazingly close.
Yeah, must be in the good book for some reason, because when I look at my life, I feel very fortunate that every morning I say thank you. I don't know to whom, but I say thank you. And I appreciate everything and every day because I have a lot of scar on me.
Yeah, we're gonna
We're
get to some of those other scars. So when your father came home,
Yeah.
you had no notice, right? Was this like a great
Absolutely not.
shock?
We never heard anything from him in almost 3 years, 2.5, and 3/4. He was arrested in 42, and he came back in 45 at the beginning or end of 1944. No, we never knew anything about my father.
Did he just walk in the door?
He walked in the door, he were, with my father, he had a very terrific life in some way. Anyway, he came back. And of course, I remember he took my brother in his arm. My brother was not even 4 years old, you know, and I on the side, and my mother, you know, she was crying. Anyway, he stayed there an hour, and he said, I have to go out. I did not know what he was doing. You know, I did not ask any question, because, you know, my parents were very strict from the very beginning to their whole life. No question to ask, you just listen. And he went out. I don't know exactly what happened. He never told me. My mother never told me, but he went to the police headquarters. I don't know who was there. I don't know what happened. I don't know. But what I do know, the head of the police department of that town, you know, like in Newark, the sheriff disappeared. I don't know what happened. No idea. Because after the war, there was no justice, you know, going to trial and so on. The resistance took care of a lot of people who did collaboration with the German, a lot. Men and women, because a lot of women, you know, had a relationship with a soldier or an officer. And that I remember after the war. I remember the liberation of the American. The town was liberated by the American. And I remember their GMC truck and the Jeep, and they were throwing Hershey bar of chocolate and candy, a roll of candy in different color. And I opened up and I said to my grandmother, what is this? She said, it's bonbon. He said, yeah, and it was great. And,
Is that your first Hershey bar? Have you ever seen one?
I never knew what chocolate, I never knew what was a banana. I mean, I didn't know anything. I was completely out of the circle.
And you were still, you must have been very skinny at that time.
Yeah, I was very skinny for many years. Not now.
No, now, you're prosperous.
Yeah, I was very skinny. I was really very deprived, and I was mentally, I was really mixed up. Because a lot of things, people don't realize it. You know, in town, not only in my town, but every town was restriction from the German. So at night, no light, no light. So the house was black. So when you are a young kid, you know, you have a little problem with that. That was one thing. I remember when the plane, especially in 44, passing by the American plane and the Canadian going, I don't know if they were going to Normandy or somewhere else, but it was not for a railroad station where they were bombing. I never saw the bombing, but I heard the noise of it. And so a lot of things like that did happen, and it marked me. And I never saw a kid for almost 3 years. So you know,
That's, so what happened? So the war's over, your father's home, you are a mess.
so I
What-
was
so what happened?
physically, I was in very bad shape, very bad shape. So they made a demand to a Jewish organization who's still in existence. You can look on the internet, it's called OSE, who rescue Jewish kids who are physically in bad condition and also they need help. So they sent me there. I was accepted, not right away because it takes time. And I went there for almost 1 year. So I learned, they took care of me physically. I had a little, what is it called? A little shadow on my lung. Was nothing terrible, but it was a shadow. So due to malnutrition and the condition. So I was there for 1 year and schooling, because I didn't go to school. I went to elementary school. I barely knew how to make an addition or writing properly. So in the morning, we were uh, teaching, I mean, we had a teacher, was a co-op, co-ed home, separated, but it was good. So in the morning, we had a teacher who taught us how to write, how to make an addition, subtraction, and so on. And in the afternoon, we were outside because it was in the French Alps, and we had to go and sit on a chaise lounge. They gave us a blanket and breathed the, and I was there for 1 year. Almost 1 year.
That part sounded pretty good,
Huh?
pretty good on the chaise lounge.
Oh, it was very good. Very good.
So after a year, you were more
I was
fortified?
in a better shape again, few pounds. I remember they gave me injection. That was awful. Injection of sea salt water. And it was so painful. It was burning, burning, you know. But I felt much better and I gained few kilos. So I came home. They said now to my parents, we need another group coming.
So you get home, and then what happened?
So I was about 14 years old, and it's not like in the United States, you have to decide at a very early age what you want to do. So I was not a good student, of course. I was bad. So
we don't,
what do you do? So my parents, both of them, they were scholars. So what they decided to do with me? So they said, you have to learn a trade. What do you want to learn? I had no idea. Only, fantasy, but no idea. So my father said, no, you have to learn something. For some reason, he passed by a school who was a school of upholstery for car. So he went inside, and to make the story short, I was accepted. So for 3 years, I learned how to upholster a car. And as soon as I started, I really fell in love with what I was doing. I was good for it. So I graduated after 3 years in the French way with a diploma. Not everybody get it, but I got one. My parents especially my father, I was so pleased. So I got a job in a factory of car, making luxury upholstery of car. And my mother said, and one day she came and she said to me, you know, to be an upholsterer of car your whole life in a factory, that's not good. You have to do something else. So she pushed me to go at night to the best school of France, really, who was in Paris, to learn upholstery for furniture. So I did learn. I guess I was maybe not the best, but I was good at it. So, and that was it with so.
Okay, so you're on your way to America soon, but first you get drafted.
Yeah, at the age of 20 was the war in France, in Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia. So I was called as a draftee. So they sent me to Algeria. So I served in the French army for 28 months, 8 months of training, 20 months in Algeria. I don't know I don't know how I end up there. I was not so brave. I was scared, of course, like everybody else, who, but I did serve. And prior to that, I said before I go, I said to my father, maybe I can go to Canada or something. And my father, who was very French, and he was an officer in the French army, he said, I went to war, your grandfather went to war, your great-grandfather went to war, and I have the picture of them, you go. And so I went, so I had no choice. So.
Oh, you were thinking of being a draft dodger to Canada. You were thinking of avoiding the draft.
I told him that I can avoid it, but it didn't work. I had the wrong name.
No bone spurs.
So, all right, you get out of the army
Yeah,
and Ronnie's waiting for you in America. How do you get over to America?
that's a long story, but a short story. My mother had a cousin who came to America in 1920. And he came to France when I was in the army. And he said to my mother, where is your older son? My mother said, he's in the army. But what did he do? Well, does he has a profession? She said, oh yeah, he's an upholsterer. An upholsterer. So he said to my mother, he's good? She said, I think so. Well, so he said to my parents, if he's good, he has a future in the United States. So why you don't send me, you send him to me to America. So my parents, my father was not very happy, not happy. But he said, maybe you should go for 3 years and come back. So I ended up in New York City and I didn't go back.
So when you got to New York, did you have any money?
Oh yes, I had a lot of money. I came in America with $100. Not a penny more. So I want to tell you, this cousin took me for 6 months, but German back home, very strict. And he said, Guy, he called me Guy in German. If the door closes at 10 o'clock. If you come at 10:01, the door is closed. I said, okay. But I was almost 24, so, I tried to learn the American way to go out, So sometime it was 10:30, 11:15, the door was closed. So I end up at the Port of Authority in New York City, sleeping on the bench. Well, but many times.
So did you speak, how was your English at the time?
My English at the beginning was none, because I took German with my background. So I didn't know anything about English at all. So at night, I went to school for immigrant, first on Broadway, 91st Street, called Joan of Arc. And then my cousin said after 6 months, "You're on your own now." So I had to move out. I took a a room with a lady, Mrs. Cooper, I remember, in the Bronx. And then at night I went to school in high school with the dropout. And the teacher came to me and he said, "Guy, you don't need anything. You need a good grammar and good English." So it took me time. And before my 3 years, I met my beloved, my wife of 61 years, and I stayed. I never went back to France full time.
So with your beloved, you started an upholstery business, right?
Yeah, well, first I took a job as an upholsterer, working for a guy for 3 years. And we got married. I had very little money. And I mean, very little. And I said to Ronnie, my wife, I said a few weeks after, "I'm going on my own." And I opened up a little store of 2nd Avenue and East 84th Street. And I started my business, and I was very fortunate to meet the right people.
Named
But,
Rockefeller?
I worked very hard for many, many years, many hours, and so on. Then I moved to a bigger store on 2nd Avenue, on 1st Avenue and 81st Street, then another one. Anyway, that was great. So after 25 years, I said, "That's enough. I'm working only for people. I'm doing something else." I went into the antique business because I was restoring antique, the chairs and this and that. So I became an antique dealer.
We
And
went,
I ended up in New Hope. And I always fell in love with New Hope. And I feel very comfortable. And I'm very grateful every day when I get up. I said, "I don't know, I'm in the right book again because I'm here and everything is fine." But I never forget my past. I have a little problem there.
So your mother was very religious.
Yeah.
How, and you say you weren't, how did your views change or evolve about being a Jew, about your belief? Did you develop anything akin
Well,
to
I be
personal
very
faith?
honest with everybody, and I was always very honest. I was always had a very strong, I still have a very strong feeling for the Jewish people and Judaism, but very, very strong. I don't go with a Jewish store in the street, but if somebody asks me what's your religion or so on, I tell them right away who I am. I think the Jewish people are great people. I don't like to generalize because some are not, but look, in general, we are good people. We are good. and believe in God, that I have a little problem there. But lately, maybe it's due to my age, I become a little more, maybe trying to be a little more religious, because I had a great parents, but my mother was so great. And if she be alive, she'd be very proud. I belong to a synagogue where I had a Rabbi Dayan, who was very nice. Now is Rabbi Janine, who is very nice also. And I like the people. So when I come on Friday night, not every week, but I do come, I feel very good. And I ask questions to me. I don't have the answer yet. Maybe one day I'll be a student, a rabbi student.
So, well, listen, Guy, you are our treasure. You're KHN's treasure,
Thank you.
and wonder if anybody has questions for Guy.
Did you ever go back to France after?
Yeah, I go back to France very often because, first of all, my mother was living there. She came to the United States 150 times, but she never wanted to live here because for many reasons. Okay. And I do go back to France, yes. And I was very close to some friend of mine who were in the same home. So for years and years, every Yom Kippur, I was going to France to meet them, to say Kaddish for our family. And now I don't go anymore because I'm the only one.
Did your brother, what did your brother do?
My brother does know very little about the war because I told you before, he was born in November 39. So at the end of the war, he was barely 4 years old. So he doesn't remember. He only remember one thing, and what my grandmother told him was a little stupid, but it's done. And my brother is really, how you call it? He's not very close to the Jewish people.
Is he close to you?
Yeah, we are very close, but we are so different. My brother is more towards Catholicism. You know, I don't know if you know it. I told the rabbi in Paris was a lot of kids were placed in convent during the war, and this one was the cardinal of Paris for many years, Cardinal Lustinger, who was a Jewish boy. He grew up in a convent. He became the cardinal of Paris. And on Yom Kippur, you know, France is not like America. They have synagogue, but not so many. Okay, so he used to come to the synagogue saying Kaddish every Yom Kippur, and they accepted him.
As
Anyway,
long as he pays him.
the
How
way,
many pages dues?
yeah, maybe.
Did your brother come to the US or did he stay?
Yeah, my brother live in France and he live in the United States also, but more in France than the United States. Yes. Anybody else?
I do.
Hi.
Two questions. One, the baker that turned your father in, was that what happened? how your father went to get a loaf of bread and he never came back. I didn't
He
understand.
said, who, did the baker, when your father went out to get bread, was it somebody in the store? The baker?
No,
or
no, no,
just-
no, no.
Just somebody.
He was passing by in the main street, it was not a big headquarters, it was a house, okay, where the police was their headquarters. And I told you, my grandparents were well known in town. Okay, so he called him by his first name, hey Raymond, come in. So my father went inside, and that was it.
All right, the second question was, you wound up on Second and First Street in the Upper East Side. Was that because it's Yorkville and there were many Germans there?
He wanted to know if you settled on First Avenue because there were a lot of Germans there.
No, I settled in Yorkville because at that time it was the furniture district in New York City.
Exactly.
When I opened up my first store, next to me was another one. It was, the really store. Then after when I moved, I had another neighbor was an auction house called Doyle.
Doyle
Doyle Auction.
still exists.
It still exists,
Mhm.
but he's dead.
Oh, yeah.
So, but it was yes,
You also did a time in the US Army, is that?
no.
No?
When I came to the United States, they drafted me into the reserve,
Okay,
okay? In Watertown, New York, but I never went.
Oh.
They never called me. But when I came to Idlewild Airport, I could not speak one word of English. Two big MP came and I had to register. So 1 week after I went to 42nd Street was the headquarters of the army. I went with somebody, my cousin, my mother cousin, and I had my card and they said they will call you, but
so we found you at church across the river.
yes,
Some of you may or may not know that a number of KHN people for many years were helping with the community kitchen. And we showed up and Guy was behind the stove.
yeah, I served
cooking.
almost in Lambertville for 20 years. First, I 8 years at Fisherman Mart, and then I went to the kitchen for 12 years.
So did your experience as a kid give you an idea that that's what you wanted to do to help people, is give them food?
No. I wanted to do volunteer work because for 2 reasons. I was very hungry with food as a young kid, and I wanted to help people. And that's what I did. And after when I went to the kitchen, that was I met you and wonderful people. And it was a very good therapy for me. And I felt how fortunate I am. I have a roof, I have a wife, I have kids, I have friends, I eat well every day, maybe too much sometimes. I want to be, I was very happy there. I'm very sorry they closed. I miss it.
So,
I was gonna say, this is sort of more for David, do you wanna tell about your connection with Guy?
yeah, and actually I have something to share in that connection, but Guy and I met at a Shabbat at my house, and you and Steve brought Ronnie and Gil, and that was the first time that I met. And then we discovered that we had common relations in France through my family. And so we went over to Paris and Provence And actually in Provence, I went around with Guy and Ronnie and Sharon, and we went to all these little towns and all these antique shops in each town, and every one of them said, Guy, you're back. So, but,
I miss it too.
so my family over in Paris, you know, love Guy, and I'll just use this moment to just share one thing. Cause my cousins, my father's brother, my great uncle Wolf, my grandfather's brother, they were coming to America together. They were young boys. My grandfather was older. And on their way to America, Wolf gambled away his ticket to America. And my grandpa Jack said to Wolf, tough, you're staying in France. And so that's how the family stayed in France. In May of 1941, and now Wolf has a family and two young boys and his wife Rachel, he's arrested very early. May 1941, sent to Drancy, which is where your father was for 3 months. He was there for almost 7 months before he was sent to Auschwitz. And when he was in Drancy, his wife and the two boys, my cousins, took this picture to give to him. And it's the three of them each with a Jewish star. And this was to comfort him. But before he ever saw it, he was sent to Auschwitz. Amazingly, he survived and came home. He was one of 4 people in the quarter. But the sadder story is that my great grandparents, so they moved from Bialystok to Paris to be with the family. And when he was arrested, they immediately went into hiding in their apartment in Paris. And from May 1941 to April 23rd, which is today, 1944, they hid in that apartment. Nobody knows how they hid, how they survived, what they did. But April 23rd, 1944, the knock on the door, the police came, arrested them, and they were dead in Birkenau 4 days later. And it reverberated through my family, through my grandfather and my father, because he disappeared. They didn't have a chance to talk to him. My father used to write letters to him in Yiddish. He was so proud that he could correspond, and all of a sudden, silence. And so that was the great tragedy in my family. And Corinne and I both shared, that was our great grandparents, and I was named for him, David. It was David and Esther. And I thought if I could indulge you a little bit, I wrote a poem that got published called Our Isolation, which was about the story of my great grandparents. Actually, all of them. It's called Our Isolation. The catastrophe, our family's great sadness, a stone that covers things over, but not ended, that come inside us and live. 3 generations suffered in isolation, too late for repair. The secrets and mysteries hardened in slow time to stone. Here is what I know. David, my great-grandfather, carpenter by trade, a pious man, I gathered from a scribbled notation. From Graditz, it says, on the deportation list. I have a picture. He looks sturdy. I wonder if he tangled with Cossacks. What else do I know? He and my great-grandmother hid from the Nazis for 3 years, then were betrayed and murdered at Birkenau. 3 years of silence, of whispered encouragement, of unspoken dread, of Torah, prayers, psalms, ritual, of remembering their lives. Across the ocean, my grandpa Jack, oldest son, hears only silence. From voices hidden or dead shuddered in his sorrow. Did he say Kaddish? Did it relieve the stone's weight, heavy as the tools he carried to work each day and left to me in his trust? I see my father, bent to his work, chin in hand, writing and rewriting drafts in painstaking Yiddish of letters to his Zaidi. Such correspondence continued for years, I'm told, until it ended. He ground his teeth forever, not a word of those letters. 3 generations carried their isolation, one to the other, their secrets and mysteries hardened in slow time to stone. The stone is mine now. It is a gift with a price. Accept me, it says, and take all of the living, things ended and things beginning. Their stone no longer, let them be freed from its hold. Something is ended and something begins and grows with its own labors and joys. So, Sue, in answer to your question, that was our connection. And Guy and Ronnie honor me and my family through the friendship they've created. So Guy, thank you so much.
No, I
for
thank
sharing.
you very kindly. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everybody. Be well.
Thank you.
And-
That was wonderful.
It really was. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming online.
Bye.
Yeah, sure.
Sitting or standing?
Yeah, maybe we can do that, maybe. Like, what's gotta turn on, being on. Maybe you're just. Yeah, just wanna say shaking hands, shaking hands.
Here, Guy,
Yes,
your family is here.
my daughter.
She can't see, so the microphone's over there. Oh, actually.
They could hear us. Hi, Pa. You were great. Woo-hoo.
Yes, oh, yeah.
Beautiful. Well done, Pa. You did a great job.
Super bien fait. Bravo. Et bravo.
Okay, that's.
Jack West, when is that?